we can begin. Yeah. So this is the first open session of the TICYUrb. It's about the independent publishing about the city. So we have here a lot of editorial projects that they are working in Portugal, and they are from Portugal. So the first working group, is the first magazine is Dedalo. If you want to come here. Okay. Eu não sei quais são os vossos nomes. Tem aqui.
Sim.
Não sei. Podes pôr a página. Não sei.
Aqui é a tela completa.
Eu tenho o Mac.
Vou fizer um pouco. Não. É control Q. É isso mesmo. Sim.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for sticking around. It's very hot and we're all kind of tired. I know I am, so I'll try to make this not too long. My name is Orlando. I'm here with Tiago, Fernando, and Paulo. We're representing the Edolo magazine. Part of the team is also Margarida Matos Martins, who couldn't be here today. Before I start, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. There is no official website from the Edolo magazine. So if you Google it, you might come across different websites to different specific editions of the magazine. The one that I think was associated with this presentation is actually from a past edition of the magazine. We decided not to have a specific website. We printed the magazine, of course, and we kept just the Facebook page, which you can also find through the Facebook page of the event. So that said, the Edolo magazine is a magazine and a cultural promoter that was funded in 2006 as a part of the IFAUP, the Students Association of the Faculty of Architecture of the Porto University, from where we all are. We all studied or study there. The team always changes every year. So it and so does the projects of each specific editorial team. Alongside with the actual magazine, the several teams have also done conferences, roundtables, projects, installations, open calls to articles, a lot of parallel work to the magazine. We decided because of its importance as a platform of discussion within the academic community, and especially, of course, within the students, we decided to bring back the magazine, the project, because it was stopped for a few years, and we decided it was time and it was important and it was really needed. A place where mostly the students, both as architects and as citizens, could have this very important tool to our education, which is a free and open space to discuss, to debate, and to think both individually and collectively about whatever. For that reason, we centered this editorial project of Edolo 2017 within the community of FAUP, our school. trying to cross it with different approaches, with different practices to kind of broaden the discussion. Considering the flexibility of this platform and our goals with it, we tried to make all the process very operative and very focused, since the definition of the topics we would like to work to the actual making of the magazine. I think it's important to say that this is a horizontal structure. There's no coordinating figure, no professor, nothing imposed from the outside. So this allowed the IUL 2017 to start from our actual interests and our actual will to discuss our interests and our concerns, again, both as architects or architecture students and as citizens. So we discussed a lot, of course, and we ended up with our main guideline, if we can call it that, which was the title, Creative Processes, which we then refined through 3 lines of meaning, 3 lines of sense. Subject in the sense of sujeito, as the person that does something, and not as the theme. Discipline and circumstance. So, with that, we started our programming for a school year, throughout which we tried to create a productive environment around this discussion. We tried to feed our thinking through several ways. We started the launch of the project was made through an exhibition, which was deeply speculative and provocative. We did it in the We did it in the main corridor of our school, where the students have their lockers. It's where all the vending machines are and the microwaves. So virtually everyone came across with at least part of the exhibition. First, as we can see, there were only the pictures, with no legends, no context, nothing, even about the IUL. There were just someday the pictures appeared in the lockers. They were printed in regular paper, glued with taped directly to the lockers, and we left it there for a while, just like this. We wanted to, before explaining what we wanted with that, we wanted everyone to create their own readings of what that could be. We gathered the pictures both by proximity or by contrast, and we just left them there for a while, and we started to get people thinking what that was, and especially since there was no IUL project for a few years. Most of the students never had a IUL while they studied there now. So we left it there. Then, of course, we added the context. We specified the sources of every picture, and in doing so, we created a different layer of meaning and of understanding of what was happening there. But also, it happened. We didn't predict that exactly, but some of the students just decided to cut their own pictures and add them to our exhibition, and in that way add yet another layer of meaning to the relations that we were proposing, that we were suggesting between all that, adding their own input to what we proposed at first. So it kind of established a common imaginary, I'd say, around this idea of what creativity is, of what a project creativity process could be. Later on, we did several roundtables with architects, teachers, choreographers, dancers, people from psychology, several kinds of researchers, where, of course, with the students, we debated around this, especially around the creative subject and the teaching for creativity, which we thought was really needed. These sections, again, helped establish this kind of environment that allowed, that boosted the open call with it for the articles for the actual magazine. So we invited everyone, regardless of their area of action, to send us their approaches to the topic through texts, photograph essays, drawings. We try to be really free about that. The set of articles that you will be able to see in the magazine, we have some around, is the results of the selection of this text from the open call, and also from direct invitations to some people that, for their work and for their approach, we thought would help have a better general meaning of all this, tie everything up together. So, no, before that, in the magazine, they're not separated from each other. They're just we suggest an order of reading that does not have to do with who wrote what. It's just a matter of content in which we focused. Because of all the inquietation this brought to ourselves throughout the whole process of doing this, we allowed ourselves to have our own contributions as articles in the magazine. Then, to launch its actual, to sign out the launch of the magazine, which ends up being kind of the results of all this progress, of all this process, even though we wanted the magazine to be a starting point more than a finishing one. We invited the French architect Eric Lapierre to present a conference, which he dedicated to the idea of creative process and surrationalism. It was really nice. That said, it was really important for us from the beginning, as I said, to be operative and kind of pragmatic in the use of the resources we had available in order to do the best work possible with it. We talk about financial resources, of course, but we also talk about our own interests and our own availability to do this, and also about the potential of doing something more homey, more centered in our school, what the potential that could bring. This shows up in different ways. We decided not to translate the magazine, it's only in Portuguese, and also our graphic identity is all black and white, which reflects this process, the work in progress idea, as well as, of course, saved a lot of money in printing. Just one note about the cover, which is completely blank. We decided to, as we did throughout the process, to invite everyone to join in to this creative process and add their own input. So the cover is blank, so that every reader could add their own approach to the content, or not. And then it's just the white canvas, the blank canvas that both scares and excites us, I think. On a more personal note, I'd just like to add to finish that the seriousness and the rigor with which we did all this work never collided, not once, with some kind of informality that we wanted and that seemed to us particularly productive in the context of a school and of students. So we focused more on the contents and on the actual discussing the effects that could bring than on the material side. Our compromise was to bring back this initiative and propose different approaches, different ways of taking it to good terms. I believe we did that. It's a huge responsibility to be in this position, but it's also a huge opportunity in freedom and liberty. So at the end, it was also important to us to try to pass it on and kind of give our input to everyone who was interested in making future editions of the magazine, so it won't end again. And it was really, really important to us. We think it was really needed that the school had this space, this free space of discussion and debate with no limitations from whoever. That the law, as we understand it, is about that. And now I'm finished.
So, hello, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us, Friendly Fire, to be here today. Friendly Fire is these two fanzines, these two issues of a fanzine, and we'll try to explain what we did during these years. So, Friendly Fire is this group, is me, Matilde, Pedro Barata Castro, Gonçalo Azevedo, Pedro Bahia, and Ivo Poças Martins. This is our headquarters at Bolsa, at Bairro da Bolsa, of Cisa Vieira. And we also have this small shop, which in Portuguese we call it Loja que faz bico, which it's an important identity for us, and you will see that later. And this is where we did our two launches of this magazine. So this is the first number of the skull. So it's a very it's an auto-published format. It was very important for us, the object itself, and because it is auto-published, we had a lot of liberty to use the kind of language that interested, with humor and subversive language.
Well, and the first number that we did a joke with a German word, say, does this Friendly Fire, is to create this connection with the first album of very known rock bands that normally have their names on the album. And the name of Friendly Fire comes, of course, as a spirit way of being in the architecture critic. And somehow we share the same sensation with Dédalo, this idea that we come from a very strong study and faculty, so it's very important to be more subservient or disobedient to the school. And the idea of Friendly Fire is that it's an American concept, military concept, that when we shot Nelly, it's called Friendly Fire. So it's like a way of excuse ourselves of a wrong shoot to Ali. So we use this iconic image of Corbusier, and we start to question in a moment of crisis when we did this first issue.
It was in 2011. No?
2011, exactly. We wanted to touch freedom to talk of everything that was happening. So somehow we use this fanzine spirit and idea of publication, like some of collective of artists used to use this kind of artist book that you also know from the art world. We did the book launch in this corner shop
yes.
that was never used, and we squatted to do the book launch.
The magazine is always edited in AutoCAD, which is not the most practical tool to edit a publication, but we are all architects, so it made sense to make this all in AutoCAD. It is a very artisanal, let's say, way of producing the magazine, the fanzine. The illustrations, Ivo Poças Martins draws a lot of these illustrations, all made in AutoCAD, and he has done work to other publications also. And the first issue, it was we only had 50 copies, so it was directed to our friends more or less. So we made fun in a very friendly way, no?
Exactly. But we were not afraid to talk of different generations of old teachers, or they were at the time invited to be curators, and they were defending their PhD. So it was a bellic combat between partners, our students and generation before our.
And what we didn't expect, it was the repercussion of this small publication, because then it got chosen to be on an exhibition archizines that was started in a school created by Elias Redstone, and then traveled to New York to the storefront and to other places. And it was the first issue that we see is this. So, but it's in Portuguese, no one understood. So, but it gained a lot of attention there.
And the problematics were our problematic,
It's
our
very
city,
familiar, exactly.
our country, our crisis that we were living in. So it was like traveling around the world in the loss of translation. But of course, we say that the cover was really important,
Yes.
Became very iconic.
And it got a review in Architects newspaper, which, I mean, for a small publication, it quite surprised us also.
And it's these journals belong to the architecture chamber. So if you are a member of the Portuguese Architecture Chamber, you know about this magazine. And somehow they call someone to do a critique to our magazine. So again, this disobedience that was bringing to the institutional side of the architecture or political side of the architecture.
This was the number 2, which the title was Lorem Ipsum, which is the designers when they don't have any content to say, so they put, because no one, it's in Portuguese, and if it was being read by foreigners, I mean, they didn't understand, so it was, the content was irrelevant.
Irrelevant, exactly.
The flies, no?
Yeah, we use this joke that nothing changes or nothing changed, only the flies. So we still talk about the same sheets and the same our personal problems. But again, there was people interested in our more outside way of discuss the architecture.
And all covers has a different layout of the flies. So. These are some, just so to see some images of the fanzine. Is always with this kind of AutoCAD kind of drawing. The themes are very, how do you say? Go to the very prosaic, very.
Yes. We touch the dark side of the architecture that normally we don't talk, like for example talking about this kind of drawings of Caesar that now became more famous, but also a dark side of this kind of alter egos that we were carrying with us, but with big names Pritzker architects were also carrying with them.
Yes, we talked about these themes with not thinking about the consequences. It was a very free way of writing.
And somehow people were calling us that wanted to make part of this site. So we start to discover that in this already so close world of architects, there was other architects with their own ghosts and alter egos and wanted to participate. So we start to have in between, the middle of a magazine was for a poster and for an EVT. So, for example, these architects, Nuno Valentim is one of the most prized architects in Portugal in rehabilitation and refurbishment. Is one of the architects doing more public buildings on the old city, historical city of Porto. So people also carry with them their own problems.
This was one of the launches. After this, also, I mean, Friendly Fire is a fanzine, but it's also the group, it's also the state of mind, like the way we talk. It's like an alter ego, let's say. In here, when we write, is different than when we write some other place. And then we got challenged to do this encounter. It was Encounter of Architects in Mação.
In the center of the Portugal, and the group was very elastic because people from other generations were with us doing a concentration of architects in the middle of the economical crisis and credit crunch. So a lot of architects came to talk about their own problems and also having like a fight club in the center of the country.
Then we were invited by Trienal to do, by Mariana Pestana, the curator of this exhibition, and the idea was to try to specialize, let's say, the production of a magazine. So we came with this kind of structure, which we called
a space probe. That at the time there was a space probe in Mars taking the dusts and bringing to United States to be analyzed. So we took the same idea of this kind of unbalanced structures that seems that are always falling apart, and this kind of old scientific science movies that we never know if they will go through the galaxy, and that was the idea that was important
and the idea,
for us.
we have material there, so people could manipulate and create a fanzine. So the idea was to create the biggest fanzine in the world, because then they put in the upper shelf the finished fanzines, and every fanzine created one single fanzine.
Each visitant was responsible to create an article or a critical or a montage of images from the raw materials that we were giving to the people. So it could be urban problematics, neighborhood problematics, identity crisis, etc.
And we had a lot of talks.
And people came to use the fanzine with their own collective. So there was people from here, the ISCTE, the group, the research team came, went to the probe to do the fanzine. Others from the Faculty of Architecture in Porto. Known magazines like Espelho, Arca, that it's a very known magazine. So they went there and they create their own fanzine. So they were invited to change also their methodology.
The fanzine, we call it LKFB because it is Loja que faz bico, we name it there. And it traveled
all over the country.
There
was a dance company that used the space probe to do their own meetings.
Last year it was for a debate with Sotomor and other people at Joff Bar. And then we were invited also to do to be in the Portuguese representation at Venice Biennale, created by Pedro Campos Costa in 2013.
Yeah, three editions ago.
It was Remco's edition, which was the theme was absorbing modernity, and we were invited to write this column on the last page, and we talked about in a very humorous way also about how Portugal absorbed modernity.
So again, we were always put it in the back or in the leftovers of something. But always being invited to have total freedom to talk of everything.
This was the...
We used the three... This is a...
it was another installation. We're just finished.
And here we are. Okay.
This was an installation for future Fórum do Futuro.
It's an important international seminar in Porto that joined every kind of... people from different areas, and in this case we were invited to do the scenography. So again, we are using the AutoCAD tools to draw something that was not three-dimensional, but it was bidimensional. And that was the different ways how we could exhibit it.
And here
this is the moment where we are right now.
Which we don't know exactly. The fanzine is still at the core. It's still the essence of Friendly Fire. We're also interested in this kind of more practical objects. And
we are studying, and the idea for us important to come here is that what kind of research we do, that it's not so academic, and but it's a parallel life we have, that it's always on research. And this is what we have in hands right now, that it's to rethink Portugal dos Pequenitos, that it's an incredible experience for people from Portugal, that it's a way of representing the identity in the middle of the fascism in Portugal. So we are
and we did this with Álvaro Domingos, geographer, Portuguese geographer.
That is also questioning himself and the country to the idea of what is Portuguese identity.
Exactly. Thank you.
Vai alguém passar os... Pedro. Sim, só. Pode ser, tudo. Põe-se sem... Isto para a frente ou para trás. Vai-se avançando. Boa tarde a todos. Ou good afternoon. É um bocado estranho. Eu realmente estava preparado para falar em português, mas ouvi tanto inglês e a língua tem isso. Altera a forma como nós pensamos. So, because the last interventions were very interesting and I was listening to them in English, I will be speaking in English. So my name is Pedro Nito. I'm a researcher, architect, and very passionate and focused and coordinating an editorial project which is called Scopio Editions. So I'm very happy to be here, and I have in this table collaborators of this editorial project and also researchers. So José Barbedo is a researcher in the Faculty of Architecture in a research group, and also collaborator of Scopio Editions. And Eduardo Ribeiro is not from the Faculty of Architecture or university, but is someone that relates with Scopio Editions, the project, because of his interest in art thematic. And which is very close to photography, but I'll be speaking this next. So I'll try to explain, give you an overall perspective of our editorial project, which globally is related with architecture, art, and image. And try to pinpoint some important characteristics, some important issues that I think relate very much with the presentations and the editorial projects that we have saw before, and that I think are worth discussing. So even though overall it's architecture, art and image, our focus, our passion is photography, contemporary photography related with architecture. And so this means that, first of all, we believe that we should have an overall understanding about architecture. Architecture, city and territory are important concepts that we have. So to understand how architecture characterizes and forms and structures the city, how the cities characterize and transform the territory. Also, our publications and our authors and the research we do tries to believes in image as a territory instrument, as a critical instrument. A critical territory was what I was trying to say. And so this means that photography, in this case, that the works that you can see published in the several types of publications that we have, they always try to have a stance, to have to say something, to create a visual narrative, about space, about architecture in this overall sense, and also to try not to be so worried about the aesthetics and the form and the space by its own, which is important, but also try to be sensitive of how spaces are appropriated, transformed, lived, and also, of course, their symbolic, allegorical, and other dimensions that space has, and architecture as a cultural, a very important cultural expression of every time and societies. So I think this is very important, and I think the works that we have seen before also show this. Another thing that is very interesting in our editorial projects is that that I think it differentiates, or it's not common to see editorial project like this. It's very related with research. So you have people that are linked with different types of studies, and that are in some way responsible for the curatorial project, for the for the editing of the several publications, and have not only educational, so the teaching, the pedagogical strategies, the what is being asked to, and exercise that are asked for the students in this terms architecture do, are very, somehow they can see examples of different strategies of authors or collective groups or institutions that use photography and image in this critical and this inquiring way, and even also as a design instrument, not so worried about the construction stages or problems, but more like to explore ideas, and where the subjectiveness, the fictional way, the imagination is very present. You are seeing here, we have more than 20, well, almost 30 titles, and you have authors that are very known, and different type of publications, and other authors that are not so known. We have calls open. You are seeing here No, and the author of No, he won the international photo book contest that Skopje has every year, and he built with us his book, and he will be speaking about this interesting project. And here you see the social dimension of the space of photography, and how a photo book, can create a memory that it is here, and also tell an important story of this process. And you see here the image. This is the editorial project started with Skopje magazine. So it's all written in English. It was directed, our objective was to make us known outside of Portugal. This is an important idea, not just because of the authors, the Portuguese authors, most of them, but also from abroad, but also the project in itself. This Skopje Editions is linked to university and research and to the Faculty of Architecture, but at the same time has a cultural association. So it's open to the outside. So it tries to have the best of the two worlds. And so, in a sense, it has it tries to take advantage of the liberty that this allows, to invite and to have other groups and other authors not coming from the academic universe. And so, also the internationalization is a very important strategy for us, and that's why we try to always have bilingual or English, but also we have, of course, some publications that are only in Portuguese. You are seeing here a collection that we are going to launch, Skopje Critical. This is interesting because the idea, the concept here, the objective was to do a publication that was, the main objective was to polemize, to create discussion about architecture in this broad sense. In this case, we have here the author of the interview to Paulo Mendes da Rocha, a known architect, and the interview, the only interview, questions Paulo Mendes da Rocha in terms of ethical dimensions and political dimensions of the architecture, and it's going to have the collaboration of invited authors that will read the interview and try to be critical and have their opinion about these matters. So here we are interested in creating a discussion, and José Barbedo can also speak a bit about this. We have different types of editorial projects. Here is a project related with, don't know how you say it now, lighthouses. These are very specific architecture not only in our coast but also internationally, and we wanted to do a differentiated project about these architectures, so that the problems that they are faced with the technology, the experience, the memories, how they relate with their territory. So as you see, we have very different types of editorial projects, but what is common in all of them is the use of image photography as a poetical and critical instrument, and always very interested in giving a new perspective, opening up our awareness, our perception of the real. And of course, we have a platform in the net. You are seeing here different researchers from different universities outside and inside Portugal. We have an international conference. It's on the surface. I don't know if some of you know Paul Rosselli, who is here. We recently published this book, a talk on architecture in photography. And this is the first book of the collection of 4 that was conferences that were done in the Casa das Artes, and there was always an architect with an artist or a photographer, and they debated about their experiences and strategies. So we have here also a selling platform. This is the call. This is the winning prizes of the last call of the International Photography Contest. Escape Architecture, New Leipzig. This is all in the net, and I call your attention that new calls are open until December in photography and also in photo book, as Eduardo, he participated and he won, and one of the prizes is to really work with us and make a Scopio book. So I'll go up many things and many projects. We really have many authors and many groups collaborating with us, but I'll just pass the word. I don't know if for José or Eduardo to say something about No, and I have here the images. Okay.
Obrigado à organização pelo convite e à Scopio por vir aqui ter umas breves palavras, não é? O tempo vai ser muito curto. Este é o livro físico publicado pela Scopio. Rapidamente vou falar de 2 períodos em que o trabalho foi feito. Isto já começou em 2005, portanto a primeira fase do projeto foi no Feijó, na margem sul, onde cabo-verdianos trabalhavam terrenos baldios. Portanto, este foi ainda a preto e branco, em película. Teve uma segunda fase em 2009, aí comecei a desenvolver no nó da Amadora, e durante alguns meses andei a perceber-me ali das rotinas das pessoas que trabalhavam ali as terras. Portanto, foi uma abordagem inicial difícil, porque há um sentimento de desconfiança para quem chega com a máquina fotográfica. Por outro lado, havia uma ordem de despejo para eles saírem dali, portanto pensavam que eu era da Câmara, portanto um sentimento de insegurança relativamente àquilo que se iria passar com as suas hortas. Avançando no tempo, chega-se a 2013, uma altura em que eu em termos profissionais, deixo de ter trabalho na área editorial, que era a minha área das revistas internas, de circulação interna das empresas, e começo a dedicar-me aos meus projetos e à autopublicação e a materialização em livro, portanto, dos meus projetos surge de uma forma natural. É então em 2014 que é posto em maquete o trabalho do Nó, vai a concurso, não é, da Scopio, e ganha o prémio e tem então aqui a publicação. Para falar brevemente do conteúdo do livro, posso dizer que As pessoas mais velhas vieram entre 61 e 73, que foi o governo de Portugal que promoveu a vinda de cabo-verdianos para virem trabalhar nas obras públicas, na construção civil. Portanto, tem a ver com a deslocação de pessoas, com a imigração, tem a ver com a apropriação de um lugar, ou como tornar um não lugar num lugar, e também questões relativas à identidade e memória, portanto, a perda de referentes do seu passado, e pronto, e as coisas podem seguir por muitos caminhos. Obrigado.
Obrigado. Eu tinha para aí uns slides, mas acho... Ok. Boa tarde. Agora fiquei confuso. Inglês, português. Acho que vou tentar português. Muito rapidamente, o Pedro já falou sobre o projeto. Este é um livro sobre uma entrevista que foi realizada no início deste ano. Aborda um conjunto de questões bastante amplo e com o objetivo também de confrontar um arquiteto que é bem conhecido de todos, mas que já tem, digamos, quase 90 anos, tem um longo percurso e ao longo desse percurso foi sustentando um discurso de uma forma muito dinâmica e lúcida e sempre atenta ao momento presente, e interessava-nos confrontar com essas questões, e daí saíram outras abordagens e da própria leitura que cada um dos convidados fez. Surgiram diferentes perspectivas. Nós convidamos, neste caso, o nosso coordenador editorial, que convidou o Álvaro Domingos, o Pedro Bismarck, eu próprio também escrevo umas palavras, e o Pedro Leão, como também faz considerações, e surgiram, no fundo, questões que desenterram velhos problemas que têm a ver com a condição transformadora, as dimensões políticas da arquitetura e em que medida o arquiteto tem capacidade para mudar o mundo. Isso nos coloca novamente, no momento atual, perante uma questão que é de sempre e onde estão os limites da nossa lucidez e o discurso que é necessário hoje ter para poder acreditar que é possível dar sentido à arquitetura, e o discurso que ela, no fundo, em certa medida, foi perdendo com uma certa constatação dos limites da atuação do próprio arquiteto e da própria arquitetura enquanto disciplina isolada. Eu vou deixar por aqui, foram questões que eu quis só colocar para, no fundo, incentivar o debate, e quem sabe outras leituras poderão enriquecer esta discussão.
Olá, boa tarde. Good afternoon. I will speak in English. I think it's better. Okay. But I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, so that's good. Okay. That's good. I do have the website and my voice and 15 minutes. So. it's something already. Thank you for being here. It's for sure your interest to be here because it's a long day and now maybe it's getting fresher outside. So thank you for being here. My project, it's kind of personal and also collective in a sense that myself, I got engaged with the practice of graffiti and street art here in Lisbon when I was a teenager, like in the 90s. Now I'm 41, so and that's a long shot for a young urban researcher, right? But anyway, I'm 41 and I've been my first degree was on communication design, and during the time I was doing my communication design course, I was practicing graffiti on the street. Initially just cartoons, and then I've realized it was like a language of the hip-hop culture that I was not like 100% connected. But anyway, it was a strong impact on my life during my teenage times, and I got the name. I got my signature to be known. And because I was one of the first 10, let's say, that started this practice, but above all, I was the first one that made a degree in the university from my age. So I felt always that as a big responsibility for me, because I got the street experience and I got the academic privilege to study on university. So it was my mission, to blend these worlds. After the communication design course, I've took urban design post-graduation. Then I traveled and went to methodologies of participation outside in Rome, already with urbanism in the background, strong practices. And then I've came back to Portugal. I started doing communication design practice. I worked on the Architects Guild for about 9 years as a communication designer here in Lisbon. At night I was taking the second degree in architecture as like crazy passion, and just stopped because I made kids. So I have 2 kids, and at that moment I stopped. But meanwhile, well, I got pretty engaged on the development of urban art here in Lisbon. Like there's a structure on the city council that's devoted to these subjects. I was like engaged on the first contacts, and I was also promoting, for sure these big facades on Avenida Fontes Pereira de Melo and this kind of stuff. Our intention was not to do city marketing actually, and from that point I was doing that with Vils and an Italian guy, and we went like different directions. My direction was to complete my PhD actually. I was a student in engineering faculty, technical, doing in public space, and my PhD in public space, but no scholarship. So it was kind of hard. Then I found a way to get a scholarship in the Fine Arts School. So now I'm completing my PhD on the Fine Arts School. It's the last year. I will deliver my thesis in October. And meanwhile, this is a long history, but it was fast, only 3 minutes, so I have plenty of time to talk. Meanwhile, in 2014, I've decided to develop this idea of producing a conference about this subject of graffiti and street art, specifically a conference, not a talk, not something like parallel to a festival or something like that, because actually in the 2010 there was not so many festivals as they are today. And well, after Corona project, that was this one of the big facades, it got huge visibility. We went different directions, and my direction was the PhD. So my idea was to invite people to do stuff on the street, but not give them permission to do whatever. You know, like know that people that produce graffiti and street art are in town, but not giving them permission or a wall or materials. And this was my intention, to put people together to discuss the subject, and things will be produced in parallel, you know, like spontaneously as they should. And that occurred. In the first edition was a big success. Actually, we got like, it was an open call for people to deliver papers like I'm doing here. Our intention was to do it 100% academically, because on this area of work, the street production goes much ahead of the academic production. So what we need to do is to put it like very academically and dissecate and to work that. And I've managed to do this conference on 2014, went out a book regarding these communications. And in the second year of the conference, we've decided to produce a regular publication, a scientific journal. But work the scientific journal as extremely cautious and with all the scientificness as possible, you know, like to have, as we have now, like 25 PhD professors from 15 countries looking at this subject and making the revision of the articles that we receive. Something very strongly academic about something that's really not academic. And this is the profound idea, the thing we are developing. So since 2015, we started producing two articles, 2 issues. It's like 1 volume, 2 issues. This is the minimum you need to be indexed in the scientific indexation services. And there's a catch here, because to whom who are on the research area, they know that you need to have an index of production of publications. And if the journals are indexed and reviewed by pairs and all this crap, they got credits, and it's good for the professors. So we managed to get this scheme to get people coming by their own costs to the conference in Lisbon. And this is going on since 2014. Meanwhile, the subjects are different. Each number have a different subject. Actually, they are full open access. You just go to the website, and you can go here. Like in the past activities you have here, the conference in 2014, even photos and stuff, they're still around here. But the journal, you have the first edition in 2015, and you can actually download each article. Okay, so it's PDF, you can download it. It's full open access. So, and we have, this is a scientific-oriented association that's producing this, and we have a protocol with the research unit of the Faculty of Fine Arts. So we can access the auditorium once a year, so we can have some academic credibility, but we are kind of independent for doing whatever we want. I'm always talking about we. Actually, I'm myself much of the month of the year, but the teams gets bigger when you got the conference. The conference, actually, it's going to happen now in July. In 5, 6, and 7 of July in the Faculty of Fine Arts, and in 7 will be in Cascais, actually. And it's, you can see we use 2 rooms already, and it's like full gathering of people from many places. What happens is that much of these people, they send articles for the journal. Some of them, they are not approved by the scientific committee. I'm not, you know, it's like independent blind review and this kind of stuff. But in any case, even the ones that are like refused, some want to present and want to, you know, share their points of view. So they come, and all this generates a really interesting dynamic for the subject. Actually, it's a unique dynamic because there's no specific academic publication about graffiti and street art. This is unique in the world, and what happens is that there are different publications about this subject, but they are from different scientific perspectives. Like, for instance, some people from architecture, sometime in their life, they did an article on one or two, and they published on this and that magazine, or people from sociology, anthropology, geography, wherever. And cultural criminology, actually, they are the ones that produce more contents to this subject, but usually they not cross points of view, scientific points of view to the subject in any forum. So we generated this forum, they are crossing these perspectives on the subject. So it's an interesting catch there. The structure actually is dependent on every year knocking at the door request for budget for many institutions like the FCT, Foundation for the Science and Technology, Arts Council, Portuguese Arts Council, different kinds of, always different combinations of funding. We don't have any year-to-year budget managed, and we try to be light on the way we conduct this and allow people to gather and share as much as possible. So we have a fee for publishing, but it's kind of residual, and also the access to the conference, it's free, just for the presenters. For the ones they are not presenting, it's like it have a cost, like 40 euros cost. It's not too much. And this is more or less the structure. But coming back to the beginning, on these 4 minutes I still have, actually we come from the practice. Most of the academics of this area, let's say like 75% of the academics, they, in a certain point of their life, they contacted with the practice, like self-awareness practice of graffiti and street art. Although we try to maintain the concept as open as possible, we include, for instance, regarding to this subject, approaches very near the self-constructing elements in the public space. For instance, this year we will have, for sure you'll know, there's many architecture references here. This year we will have Santiago Cirujeda, for instance, and as practitioner, and we will have the Espacialistas. I've seen some photos of Espacialistas there also. And so we have a pretty broad idea of what's within this urban creativity and connection to street art and graffiti thing. It's not a narrowed thing like, you know, you will find there rappers and people doing breakdance on the stage. I can share you here in the last 2 minutes some images also of the practice. We actually we do activities, and our center activity is the conference, and it's on the auditorium. But we try a lot to do stuff also like parallel in the street, in an informal venue, and also do like street visits. And for instance, this is an example of a street visit. We went to, there are several examples here around Lisbon about the usage of this mural painting on the neighborhoods and stuff. And we interact with the city councils. In this example was Lourdes, and they got us a bus and took all the researchers there to see the neighborhood and to see what's happening and this kind of stuff. So we do tend to put things as in practice as possible. Myself, I'm also a producer, and because of my past of the practice and my academic knowledge of architecture and design, I produce some stuff, and I'm always in contact with the practice. So I think I will save 1 minute for the next speaker. So please, next guy. Yeah, thank you. You can approach me if you want to see this. You can.
Okay, my name is Ruben. I'm a PhD student just up the road at Católica, a PhD student in cultural studies. I'm also the founder and editor of Documents, a new online journal of arts, culture, and ethnography. There we go. It's a kind of interdisciplinary journal, so there's no we don't focus on architecture or anything in particular, but what we do focus on is everyday urban life. So in this little presentation, I'm going to just briefly kind of talk a little bit about the main sort of influences for Documents and the kind of general approach of the publication. Documents takes its name from a publication of the same name. This is it, Documents, published in Paris between 1929 and 1931, edited by Georges Bataille, a French writer, philosopher. Some of you have probably heard of him. So this ran for just 15 issues, and it was kind of associated with the kind of surrealist art movement, which our version of Documents is definitely not. So we don't have that in common with the original Documents, but what we do have in common is that this original journal covered quite a diversity of topics, including art, ethnography, film, popular culture, and they often sort of did very interesting juxtapositions, like taking jazz and music hall performances and sort of putting them alongside, the work of modern artists, and then kind of they'd have the kind of analyses of kind of everyday objects, sometimes quite sort of bizarre things, and it kind of produced this kind of very radical and subversive account of contemporary life in the late 20s, early 30s. Anthropologist James Clifford described Documents as a kind of ethnographic display of images, texts, objects, labels, a playful museum that simultaneously collected and reclassified its specimens. And its sort of focus on ethnography in particular was very interesting. And as Clifford continues, he writes, "We see how ethnographic evidence and an ethnographic attitude could function in the service of a subversive cultural criticism through a radical questioning of norms and an appeal to the exotic or the paradoxical." And this is kind of this kind of attitude kind of informs our journal today. It's also an attitude that would later become quite central to a particular strand of urban cultural studies later in the 20th century, and the work of like Henri Lefebvre, the French writer, and his critique of everyday life, and also in the UK, Raymond Williams, who had like this kind of famous statement that culture is ordinary. So it's just something. It's not something that should be sort of elevated to some put on a pedestal. It's just kind of this kind of everyday banal thing. This journal documents actually sort of presupposed another major influence of our documents, and that is Walter Benjamin's Arcades project. I guess most of you here know about it. Focusing on the arcades of 19th century Paris, Walter Benjamin sort of presents it's basically a kind of encyclopedic kind of montage of quotations and kind of little bits and pieces that he kind of takes from all kinds of sources, and he arranges them into 36 categories. And some of those categories are fashion, photography, advertising, prostitution, boredom, and this is really interesting. The Arcades project represented 30 years of research, and actually, this is just totally coincidentally, but in 1940, when Walter Benjamin was fleeing Paris and trying to flee Europe because of the war, he actually left his unfinished manuscript of the Arcades project with Georges Bataille, the editor of documents, who delivered it to the National Library in Paris, and that's how we have the Arcades project today. But what's most interesting about the Arcades project is its method, and the way that Walter Benjamin sort of presents his work. So he says, this is quite a famous passage from the Arcades project: "The method of this project is literary montage. I needn't say anything, merely show." And he says that he will let the rags and refuse, he calls it, come into their own by making use of them. And it's also quite these are his original notebooks. This is a page of his original notebook for the Arcades project, and these are some little kind of strips that he used. On there are these kind of really pretty little colorful symbols that he kind of used as sort of kind of like hashtags in a way to kind of categorize all of his different ideas. And I started to think this is kind of similar to what we do now, right? Like with all these kind of blogging platforms, and how they're kind of fragmentary and often sort of non-linear, and we kind of write about one thing one day and a totally different thing the next day, and we kind of organize them with hashtags and everything. So here, Tumblr, WordPress, Twitter, and Instagram. Just coming back to documents. I should point out that it's online only, so it exists only as a website, and it's all in English. Although we are sort of international in outlook, we're very aware that we are based in Lisbon, and we are a Lisbon-based publication, publishing in English, so that's kind of maybe a little bit unusual. And so what we are doing is our website is not online yet. We're still working on it. but when it is online, we're going to do the publication by like issue by issue. So each issue will focus on a particular theme, and this allows us to kind of like really kind of interrogate and kind of, you know, it allows for kind of very sustained, you know, discussion around this theme. So the first theme, because we're in Lisbon, is Lisbon, a global city. And we've already got some like a few really interesting people involved. One of whom is Ibano Collective. They're an artistic and curatorial collective that proposes to carry out site-specific projects and urban interventions. We've got an interview with Branco. He's a Portuguese DJ. I guess some of you maybe know about him. He does some really interesting work, kind of like mixing global sounds together into this kind of what he calls global club music. And he's worked with like all kinds of international artists. And we've got like, we're still sort of putting together the first issue, so there will be plenty more on board. So I'll just like wrap it up there, but we're like really eager to get people's contributions, and so you can visit our website when it's up, documentsjournal.net. There's our Facebook. You can like us on Facebook, or send us an email. And we hope to have the first issue up and running in just a few weeks. So should be moving along pretty quickly. So thank you.
Thank you so much, especially for people from Porto. And we have now like 15 minutes to discuss. I mean, I think that we see a lot of different perspectives and different editorial projects that are at different stage, development stage. For example, Ruben is at beginning of a project. Scorpio and Friendly Fire are more obviously more developed in terms of years also. Just to maybe to put a question about the future of your work, how you deal with, for example, the digital era, for example, between printed or online version. Why you have to, or why you want to continue? Because I think that is a really difficult work to do beside other work that we do every day. So this is my main question, my main personal question, which is a challenge for the future for your work in this kind of. Okay, the space is not good to do a round table, but anyway, if you want to comment on the work of the others, or some curiosity that you want to ask to the other. Yeah. We have a microphone, maybe. And also the public, if someone has some curiosity to ask to the.
Yeah, picking up just the challenge or the issue you talked about. The paper, the analog publications, and the digital contemporary world that we are, and how it is possible to create synergies or to combine the two. I think that's for me, it's the most challenging, and my objective is to understand how you can, in a certain way, you can extend the paper support, explain its richness, its specificity, in its interaction that you have, its universe that it creates with the authors, and it's not substituted by the digital. The digital, it complements, it can be a different thing. So I think the challenge is to link in some way the book, the physical book, to the platforms. Like people know now that books exist more and are accessible all around the world because of the net. But if they see the book, instead of, for example, scanning the images, you photograph the book or you do a video about the book. So you interest someone of the book, and maybe he will be convinced to buy the book because of the artifact in itself. And of course other strategies, but I think that's the challenge we should do, because otherwise it's getting more and more difficult for the analog, for the book, and I'm speaking about books and maybe publications that are annual or semester, but if we speak about newspapers and magazines, then it's even more difficult. But maybe you want other colleagues of mine
to come. It's a bit strange to be talking to you by the microphone and in English, but anyway, respecting the auditorium. For instance, this editorial project I was showing started in 2014, and the first idea was to make it open access, and the better way of being open access is to be online, and because of the costs, of course, it's evident. But anyway, our publication, we have the publication on a on-demand platform. People who want to publish the book, they can buy the publication on paper, and it's delivered on their home. Even if it's open access PDF, you can download. So if you want a book, you can have it. I think, and this specific project, I really respect the value of paper. For instance, I don't know if it's a generation thing, but I need an agenda, paper agenda. I don't manage to do agendas on the phone, because it's all the ways I can get to not be on the phone, on the screen, better, right? And the agenda, it's still for me, it's still paper. And although I realize that the technique, to use an agenda on the phone, it's much more, robust in terms of what you can do with your appointments and this kind of stuff. You can share your agenda. You can, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm 41. An agenda for me, it's on paper. And many books, of course. But my project specifically, this project is digital based, and we are like going up levels on because there's, in terms of the journal publishing, I don't know if you're aware, there are specific platforms with specific requisites that you need to have all the hashtags and stuff, so you can be searchable on the huge World Wide Web stuff. So it's very technological. There's a very big, it's a big challenge for whom we're starting. You need to be aware of that on the beginning, because if you don't have all the requests from the first number, you cannot apply to the indexation processes and stuff. We need to talk. I don't know.
Hi. In Daedalus magazine, each here has a different editorial board that can choose if they want to publish in the internet or by printed version. Normally, it has all the editions were printed, and one of our concerns in the beginning when we started the project was the budget. So even with a low budget, one of our main goals is was to have a printed version, so we make all efforts to do that. So the black and white, the images, the very low, the kind of paper very cheap. So we can give something to the people that share their ideas with us. So it's kind of trade with people that share their thinkings with us. So I think the minimum we can do for them is to give them a printed version. But in the next editions, it could be just online versions.
I'll just add something. In this particular case, because it's a student magazine, I think this is kind of personal, but in my opinion, I think it doesn't really matter whether you do it just online or printed, because the main concern is that you get people just thinking about stuff, thinking and discussing, and questioning. That's the main goal, so you can do it either way.
Well, for me, I think it's also a matter of time, because the physical object, it lasts. I mean, the digital is important to get the information out and to be accessible to a larger number of people immediately. But then sometimes you need time. I mean, sometimes you see a publication 10 years later. And I think only the physical object can do that. And also, the digital has the problem with the website. Sometimes if you don't pay, it disappears and the content is lost forever. And with the physical, at least, it's able to last a few more.
But well, for us, Friendly Fire, it was not even a concern if we never thought of it. Because it's a publication that it's homemade. What is important is how we share things after. That can be in a talk, it can be in we were joking when we were seeing our images and how we feed ourselves by the mails and now WhatsApp. And every time there's an article in a Portuguese newspaper about an architect or about a development urban plan for a city or something, we immediately change critics and we change, look what's happening, look, maybe we can write an article on that. So first we cook in between us, and then it can go out. But the way it gets out, for us, it was never a concern. It should be downloaded or a paper. But, well, we are 25 copies, 50 copies. What is important is what we can generate, like creating a structure for an exhibition where people can go there and talk. That was much more important, the way we download our information with others.
One is that we all have common and differences in our editorial projects, but I think it's common that we all understand editorial projects as generators, as instruments of transformation, of discussion and all that. That's the important thing. But then you can do it with a physical book and you can do it just with a digital. And if you don't do it with the digital, or if you don't do it with the book, then something is not achieved, I think. But then again, you talked about its support and memory, and it's not just that; it's an experience. It's another experience, and if you don't allow that to live, the physical book, it's something important that is lost.
As a publication that only exists online and that we only intend to ever exist online, I think documents comes up against this kind of very kind of immediately comes up with this kind of, there's this tension between being a publication based in a particular place, but seeking to engage with readers and audiences potentially around the world, right? I mean, I think this is something that's where this is a case where perhaps the medium is going to sort of perhaps guide the content a little, even in the sense that when we know that there could be someone in Burkina Faso reading documents, this changes obviously what kind of things we might want to publish. So, I mean, I'd be interested in like hearing for example, Friendly Fire is a homemade kind of very kind of locally sort of embedded publication, which, you know, doesn't so readily get transported like to the other side of the planet. So it's kind of the sort of polar opposite, and I'm just wondering whether that kind of locality guides the kind of content that you publish.
Well, our content is very local, it's very familiar. We are not thinking about the reception, or we are not also, I think, interested in internationalization of, I mean, we do what we like. If other people like it too, great. I mean, it was this exhibition that traveled with the fanzine, and it was in Portuguese, and the fanzine traveled, but no one understood. So.
Yeah, but I think we are living in a moment where more you are radical, more you are institutionalized. So more you belong to the institution somehow. There's a lot of artists that only did like guerrillas, collective urban guerrillas, and now they receive prize from Art World, for example, or there's researchers, or having a magazine like yours. It's these kind of things I think that we are living. It's a little bit ambivalent and paradoxical, and somehow without preparing it, we were on the cover of that exhibition. But what means is that all over where you are, as an architect, we have concerns that touch other disciplines, like the ones you also told, ethnography or photography or arts. So we are sharing this, and somehow it's like now when you look to some contemporary artists or architects and you look to what they did when they were young or they were students, and you are much more involved in their constructive buildings and projects when you know that they wrote articles and they were doing other things, factories where people could have platforms of research. So I think nowadays we are living that way, I think.
Okay, I think that we can stop here. If you want to stay with us more 1 hour, I think we have a cocktail. So you're welcome. And okay, if the public want to see some copy of the work of these guys, okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all for being here. Thank you.